And I'm joined now by Jeff Novitzky. Now, this subject has been exhausted for you over the last couple of days, but I've got a question that nobody has asked you yet.
Sure.
On Christmas Day, did you go on social media and read your Twitter feed?
I tried to avoid it. It's interesting. My advice to a lot of our fighters that are openly criticized is to not pay attention to social media, but now being in their shoes, it's pretty hard to do, so I did take a few peeks at it. It really is. I learn a lot of things through social media that do affect my job, so unfortunately I can't completely stay out of it, but it's definitely a new experience for me to see some of that criticism directed, toward me.
How much of it do you take personally?
I try not to take any of it. Look, I try to keep my nose down and stay focused. I did have a lot of experience in this arena in my previous job. I worked some very high-profile investigations from a lot of high-profile athletes that had a lot of power. They would criticize me publicly, in the media and in social media. So, I try as best I can to kind of fade that out and stay at the task at hand.
So there is something of a discrepancy from Monday to where we are now. On Monday, it was said that only one test came out positive leading up to this, and then you went on the Joe Rogan show, I guess, a day or two later and said that it was multiple tests. How did that message change over the course of those days?
Yeah, somebody asked me that earlier today, and I'm not sure if I misstated or where that came from, that there was one test. But to set the record clear, in early December, we learned from USADA about these 2 low-level positive tests from August and September, followed by 4 consecutive negative tests. At that point, they said that they fully evaluated Jon's testing history. They spoke with experts, and that the August and September tests they were seeing, again, as residual effect from back in 2017, and there were no issues there. And then more recently, the December 9th test came back, as positive. USADA felt that they had an obligation to share that with the Nevada State Athletic Commission, where this fight is going to happen, and that's kind of what led us here today to California.
That's a good segue to my next question, which is you found out on December 9th, I guess. That was when the letter came from USADA, correct?
No, so December 9th was the last test that Jon had. Those results were returned just last week. Okay,
so then the California State Athletic Commission had no knowledge on December 11th of what was going on when he had his licensing.
They didn't because the results from the December 9th test had not come back yet, and to my understanding, they didn't have knowledge of the positive tests or the low-level metabolites from August and September.
So I think there's a bit of a blurred line. A lot of people think you work for USADA because of your history in anti-doping. Is part of your job as the Vice President of Athlete Health and Performance, is that correct? Is part of that to make sure they get a fair shake? I mean, if you're looking at, I know you've been outspoken about marijuana in the past and that popping up on people's tests, and of course there's this situation where we're talking about, again, granulars of salt in a swimming pool, like people have been saying. Is that part of your job, is to make sure that these guys don't get, I guess, dinged for something that really isn't their fault?
Yeah, it's absolutely a big part of my job. It's to oversee the program, make sure it's got strength, comprehensiveness, that there's no loopholes. But on the other side, I'm often the eyes and ears of our athletes and fighters, and if I see something that's not right, it's not fair, I'm the one that's got to vet that out. I need to be the one to communicate that up the chain to Dana White or Hunter Campbell, my bosses, or communicate it to the fighters or their camp. So that's a big part of my job, and that's actually a part that I really enjoy. I'm in this position to protect the rights of clean fighters, and I don't want those clean fighters to be tripped up. There's a lot of landmines in the area of anti-doping when it comes to tainted supplements and the like. So that is a big part of my job, making sure to keep those fighters that want to stay clean out of trouble.
And you mentioned that starting next year, that there's going to be I guess a little bit more leniency in terms of when people use substances that are already cleared by USADA, and if any of them are tainted, they're going to be off the hook. In those situations, are you going to hold these companies accountable if there are tainted supplements, and will there be batch numbers attached to every single one of these substances so that you can monitor that kind of situation?
Yeah, so there are out on the market now, and this is the advice we give to all of our fighters. There are third-party certified supplements that third-party companies will certify are banned substance-free. So those are the supplements our fighters want to use. Look, could it happen that one of those pops positive? Yeah, it could, but in my knowledge in the history of third-party certification, there's never been one product that was certified as safe that turned out to have something in it. So the odds of that happening are very, very extremely low. I think even right now, if all of our fighters follow our advice to choose only third-party certified supplements, they're never going to run into any issues with this program.
Now, one frustrating subject that keeps coming up for you is Frank Mir and Tom Lawler. People ask why they didn't get a fair shake like Jon Jones did. However, Jon Jones did get suspended like those guys did.
Correct.
And that's why that is kind of an irrelevant argument. However, when you are going to be looking at future tests and you're seeing pictograms of pictograms, very, very tiny, minuscule amounts of a certain metabolite in people's systems, are you going to look at that a little bit differently, or is there still going to be kind of a zero tolerance policy, because we never know when these metabolites could have been ingested? It could have been pre-USADA for all we know, given the science that really is unclear at this point in time.
No, absolutely. Every case is different in its set of facts, and each independent set of facts is looked at objectively, independently. In the case of Frank Mir, is comparing it to Jon Jones's case, this week, where Jon had anywhere from single to double-digit picograms. Frank Mir had 300 picograms. Still, relatively small amount, but much more elevated than Jon. Jon went to arbitration, which every athlete has the right to do. It's a check and balance system in our program that if they don't feel USADA is being fair, they can go to an outside party, Richard McLaren's group, to have them judge it. Frank Mir had that opportunity to do it and didn't choose to do it. He decided to accept the 2 years as it was offered to him and really didn't put on a defense.
This is kind of a costly process, though. What if you're a low-level fighter and this happens to you?
Yeah, so there are fees, but they can be waived if an athlete shows a financial need. So we never want to set a barrier for that reason, where a fighter that doesn't have the resources is discouraged from going to arbitration. So we can waive that arbitration fee, definitely, and direct them towards some counsel that would be, I think, affordable.
And finally, you mentioned you didn't take anything personally when it came to social media. However, when somebody with the prominence of a Daniel Cormier, somebody who's such a big name in the sport, such a presence in the sport, an employee of the UFC when it comes to the broadcast team, comes out and calls you a joke, calls USADA a joke, is it hard not to take that personally? And have you had a chance to speak to Daniel about the situation?
I have not, but I do not blame Daniel at all for his frustration. I couldn't imagine being in his shoes. I don't mind someone like a Daniel Cormier expressing frustration at me and coming after me. I love and respect that guy as a fighter and a human being. He knows it, and I will always be here to explain and walk him through it if he so chooses. He may never choose to do so, but I'll always be in his corner and, again, understand his frustration, and I'm not personally hurt by it.
So I would never say that Jon got preferential treatment from USADA. However, he did get preferential treatment from a promotional standpoint. The UFC is moving an event for that reason, that he couldn't get licensure necessarily in Nevada had they gone to a public hearing so close to the event. Do you feel like that sends a bad message to the different athletes, that some athletes do get preferential treatment from a business and promotional standpoint?
No, because I think the moving of the fight here was not done just for Jon Jones. It was done for Alexander Gustafsson, to put in time and energy and money into his camp.
I get that, but let's say it was Curtis Millender or somebody, a lower level fighter on this card, and the same thing happened. That would get moved to another event. Am I wrong?
Potentially. That's a question you'd have to ask Dana White. But the reality is there's different levels of fighters with different interests. But that's more a question for Dana White than it is for me. My job is overseeing this program and communicating, again, to Dana and our upper management and our fighters about what I see in the program, not making decisions on what fights are going to happen and where fights are going to be moved.
All right, Jeff, well, it's been a tough week for you in terms of having to do all this media and explain things that are really even hard for you to understand in terms of the science of oral turinabol and these metabolites. So thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Yep, that's my job. That's what they pay me to do. So I prefer avoiding the scrums I have to do at events. It's usually not good news, but if I have to do it, I will.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.